Acta non verba is a Latin phrase that means actions, not words. If you want to know what somebody truly believes, don't listen to their words. Instead, observe their actions. I'm Marcus Aurelius Anderson, and my guest today truly embodies that phrase. Scott Sipniewski operates a multifamily plumbing business with his wife, Kathleen, who you may recognize her name from a previous episode. They have 4 children and 1 granddaughter. They've been married for 33 happy years. And Scott's mission and the mission of SSLOC, his plumbing company in Colorado, is to focus on building relationships for the success of everyone. Now, I met Scott a while back, and we're going to get into that story. But I'd also like to say that I have the honor of calling this man a friend, and he has impacted my life tremendously. He has introduced me to so many people. He truly is Acta non verba. He's not the guy that tells you he's going to do something. He does it. And oftentimes you don't even know about it until after it's done. So, Scott, thank you for being here, and thank you for your time and your friendship, frankly.
Thank you for having me on. It's a privilege and looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's a privilege to have you on. So, when I had your wife's Kathleen on, Sypniewskie, she talked about a lot of the culture that you guys have. And she also talked about this way that you all approach leadership when it comes to understanding this. And because of that mission that you have together, you've been able to go to 50 million in 50 months. First of all, how does that sound when you hear it said from somebody else's mouth?
Unimaginable. For me, what it's really what that 50 million, it's actually going to be 60 million,
Right.
what that represents. It's the growth of 25 people on our team and the impact we've been able to make on customers and other people and vendors. And so to me, it's not the dollar amount. It's really what that represents. And really, as you said, acting out, focusing on the success of others. And so that 60 million represents a lot of relationships.
It does. And I love that point that you made where, as leaders, initially, we're just trying to cover payroll, keep the lights on, survive. But eventually, once we hit a certain level, now we start looking about our KPI of success is not us, it's the people around us. It's our vendors, it's our customers. It's how can I help them? Because if I'm winning and everybody else around me is falling down, am I really winning or am I really leading?
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it. And so there's also this 80/80 component that you talk about in your company. Can you explain to us where that comes from and what that actually means, and then how you're able to use that as a lens through which you lead as SSLOC and everyone in the plumbing community in Colorado?
So we follow an operating system called EOS. It's based on the book Traction, and so part of that structure is to develop a 10-year target. And actually, our first 10-year target was to plumb 100,000 units, which in 4.5 years we might have done, I don't know, 3,000. So like it's really a big, hairy, audacious goal.
Hmm.
And so I was talking to Leif one day, and I was really proud of this goal that we created. And I said, "Hey, we created this 10-year goal, and it was to plumb 100,000 units." And he just looked at me and kind of looked away, and he said, Is that really the type of company you want to have?" And he just kind of walked away. And so I sat on that for a number of weeks, and I finally brought it up in one of our meetings, our leadership meetings, and I says, I think we're off on this. I said, I don't think we want to have a company that plumbs 100,000 units. I don't even know what that represents. And so from there, if we were really going to embody our mission statement of focusing in on building relationships for the success of everyone, we kind of had to look at our customers and our people. And so that's really where, that 80/20 rule, but every decision we make in a company, we say, how is this going to affect retaining our customers? How is this going to affect retaining our employees? And so that's really where the 80/80, it's really a filter for how we make decisions and whether we feel that's going to have an effect on that.
Yeah, and that says so much because that 20% you allow the wiggle room of the people that may not be a good cultural fit to kind of naturally self-select out. Or again, if we have a customer or a vendor and we see that this person or this vendor is just a headache for everybody and we don't like the way that they're treating our people, or we don't like the negativity that's being brought around it, when we first start out we say yes to everything, I understand, but you're to a point now where you can be very selective and you can say no to even good options simply because you want to hold out for the great option with this idea of, is this a customer or a client that I want for the next 10 years? And if you look that far forward, it makes you really honest about, so am I doing this just for the money, or am I doing this because I think that this is the best for the greater good of our company and for everybody else involved?
And I think, you know, it may seem that it sounds outwardly thinking like it's a filter we make a decision on, but what it's caused us to do is to look internally to say, how are we telling our story? How are we
Mm.
embodying our core values? And, you know, Kathleen and Junior and Anna and whoever is interviewing, they've really developed in telling our story and embodying those core values so that when somebody's coming aboard here, they really understand what that 80/80 means. So it's interesting. It sounds like it's an outwardly thing, but it's really an inwardly thing to say, are we presenting ourselves in that way?
Yeah, and if things aren't aligning, then we realize, like you said, that's what creates friction, and that's where we start up seeing, where is this
Sure.
misalignment? What are we trying to do? And are we claiming one thing and doing another? So again, are our
Right.
actions reinforcing what we claim that we want? And you mentioned somebody's name sort of in passing casually earlier, some guy named Leif. Can you explain to us who Leif is and who else within his sphere that you have relationships with when it comes to this leadership journey that you started on just a few years ago, frankly?
So Leif Babin, him and Jocko Willink are the authors of Extreme Ownership. And I got introduced to them after a very dark moment in my life. And I guess this is as good as time as any to start there. But um, you know, I've been able to kind of go back in time, even past the event I'm mentioning, and I feel that this journey really started in 2010 when my mom passed suddenly.
Mm.
And I had found my mom after she had died from a massive heart attack after 4 days. And I was with a buddy of mine from college, and you know, I kind of just brushed it off, and I even joked about it, saying, you know, I put a lot of stress and chaos in my family's life, and I just felt like my mom got me in the end by me finding her, and I just kind of laughed about it. But looking back, the time after that was probably the most chaotic time in my life. Probably those 7 years from 2010 to 2017, just with drinking and just chaotic behavior and bringing negative emotions home. And so that really led to the end of 2017 when I decided to stop drinking for the second time. And I realized that Kathleen and I had to get out of our other business, that we had run a plumbing business for 18 years, and we just needed a change. Anna was going to be getting out of high school, and so I found an opportunity, and you know, we moved to Colorado and decided we'd never be in business again. Anna came out with us and went to Colorado State, and we're just going to start this new journey of our lives, being empty nesters with jobs and getting checks and having insurance. And um, yeah, it was just it was it was great. I mean, we were just embracing it. But it's funny how even if you travel thousands of miles, how you know your problems still follow you. And so, um, 2019, my dad passes away, and you know it was expected, but it hit me harder again. It's an event that I kind of brushed off. I had expected it, but looking back, it really hit me harder than I thought. My dad was my hero. I really looked up to him. He was a great dad. And so after he died, looking back, soon after that, I quit believing in God. And then soon after that, I started drinking again. Just up at our cabin, just thinking casually, just thinking I could handle it. Um, so I had switched jobs a couple times, and I was working for somebody in June of 21, and Scott was going to be getting married in Nashville, and Anna and I decided to go to Nashville for a daddy-daughter weekend. She was 21 at the time. We were looking for a venue to take the wedding party. And so on a Saturday in June of 21, we go out, and by 4 o'clock, I'm blackout drunk, and she doesn't know what to do with me. And Kathleen happens to be with Katie, our other daughter in Maryland, trying to find a place to live. And Anna's calling Kathleen up, wondering, I don't know what to do with dad. And we're with some of Katie's friends. They're calling Katie like, your dad's out of control. And so they finally get me back to a hotel room. And the next thing I remember is I'm waking up on Father's Day, 8 o'clock in the morning. Scott, our oldest son, is calling me to wish me happy Father's Day. And I don't really know where I'm at, what happened. And so came home on that Sunday, and Anna and Katie and Kathleen, we sat down at the kitchen table and just kind of had a family meeting. And in that meeting, Katie voiced that her biggest concern was that I was going to get drunk at the wedding and ruin the wedding. And man, as I sat there, I just thought, I'm 56 years old, and this is who I am as a man, as a father. And I could just remember saying, I never wanted to put myself in that position again. And I had to figure this out. So the next day I get up on Tuesday, and I went online and just start looking for some answers. And I found a TED talk of Jocko Willing talking about taking ownership. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I realized two things in that moment. Number one, Anna and the rest of my family were going to have to live with that memory the rest of their lives. There was nothing I could do about that. I couldn't erase time. But after watching that video, I realized that I could make this my defining moment and turn my life around and become the person that they deserved me to be, the person that I deserved myself to be. And so I watched that video a few times. I went and bought the book. Went to the wedding. Everything was great. I didn't quit drinking at that point, and had a great wedding, and came home, decided to leave the job. And as I was talking to a customer that I'd been dealing with, I told him that I was leaving the position, and he looked at me and he said, well, what are you going to do? Why don't you start your own business, and I'll give you the work? And the work was two apartment complexes worth about $7.2 million. So that's how we started this business. So I came home and I told Kathleen, I said, I know we swore we would never be in business, but I got this opportunity. And I think if we use these principles, it will be different this time. And so we talked for a number of weeks and decided to give it a whirl. And in that moment, we realized that our mission statement from the very beginning was we're going to focus this business on the success of others. So she started reading the book, we started engaging, and finally we hired our first employee in December of 21. We started the projects, we hired a few more. And from the very beginning, we started with the principles of extreme ownership. But quite frankly, I hammered people over the head with it. I'm like, this is the way we're going to do it. And it wasn't the right way to do it. I had to learn about how to be a leader myself. And so just keep engaging. And we've had weekly meetings every week since we started the business talking about extreme ownership. So that brought us to March of 22, where we finally went to our first leadership event called the Muster. Kathleen and I went and got a chance to meet Jocko and Leif and a number of their instructors. And one instructor in particular, JP Donnell, he talks about doing brutal self-assessments to become a better leader. And as he's standing up there telling his story, I'm just remembering the chaos that I've brought and the negative emotion I just brought to so many situations, my family, my wife, just every situation. And I was just really impacted by JP. And so I went up to him and I thanked him for sharing. And we can't really remember what I said. It was a short, probably 10 seconds something. And he looked at me and he looked away. He looked back at me. And like no other man had ever looked at me and he said, I was living in guilt and I had to clean up my life and go back to church. Now, he didn't know anything about me. He didn't know that I hadn't been going to church. He didn't know that I walked away from God. But the one thing that, although I got sober on that June, I continued to get high. So I was still getting high up until that point. And in that conversation, JP and I joked that he just like waved a magic wand over me and it all got taken away. And so, I got sober, that's my sober date is that date of being completely sober. And so just another threshold that I went through. And so we came home about 3 weeks later, Kathleen and I had gotten in an argument and, she left the house to go to Denver, and man, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, man, all this is my fault. Like her lack of confidence. She just never knows what to expect from me. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I texted her and I said, hey, I need you to do me a favor. Before you come home, I need you to write down on a sheet of paper how I've made you feel for the last 30 years. And so she did. And she came back home and we sat down and she read me this list. And it's a letter that I save. And as she read this list, it was like my body was in a vice. And with every comment, the vice just tightened. And all I knew, because of the skill that I was beginning to learn of taking ownership, was I just had to sit there and I had to take it. And I had to take ownership of this. And the first thing when she finished that I said to her was, I said, why didn't you ever leave me? And she just really looked confused. And she says, I never even thought about it. And in that moment, I realized she was the example of unconditional love and support, because God must have been on her side to say, stick with this person. And I won't read, the things she wrote, but the one paragraph that she wrote that just really resonated with me, that has really become my guiding light, is what I need is to believe that this time is a new way of living for you. I would love that. I would love to see the real Scott living every day. I will need to see in time. This is how I can trust you will not turn back to the old habits. Be kind, be a good person. I would love if you could listen and not try to fix everything. Just listen. And so that, somebody just asked me, I was with my friend George up in Michigan for a couple of days, and he just asked me when my darkest moment was. And most people would think, when that happened with Anna, but I realized that my darkest moment was when she read me this letter. And I was just so embarrassed of the man that I was and the husband. And so I kind of spiraled after that. Like it got really dark for me. I actually moved out of our bedroom. I moved into the basement and I'm like, I was so embarrassed. And it got to the point where I had a really bad nightmare. I don't know what it was. I just know it was bad. It woke me up. I couldn't sleep. I went out and sat on the couch. And all I could think about was going to my cabin and getting my gun, that I didn't deserve to live anymore. I didn't deserve the love and support my wife had given me, my children. But then again, that skill of taking ownership, I flipped it. I said, what would that do? I said, you know what? No, my wife, my children, myself, I need to be the person they deserve me to be. And so I pulled myself up. and I just started this. That's really where I would say is my darkest moment. And somebody actually said that's probably the closest you've ever been to God. And so it just, since that point, it's just been this constant evolution of just searching inside myself and um, finding people that actually believe more than I do about myself. And you were the first person, we met soon after that in June at a Jocko event, the council, and um, you were the first person that just recognized the layers that was covering me up and how difficult it was for me to be present. And engaging with you and just trusting you in this process, at some point I started to believe it. I started to believe what you were saying. I'm like, why would he lie to me? And I just started to trust this and grow in this process. And really, I would say as that was 22, by the end of 23, I had really started to feel a burden of creating this organization. And um, I was starting to feel this stress at the end of that year. And I just remembered that in January, right after that, you were on a call with some of my leadership group, and you were talking about your 5 circles. And you had talked about them before, but it was a time where you had to explain them because you couldn't show them on the screen. And so when you shared the circles of health, finance, relationships, self-growth, spiritual growth, it hit me that the thing that was missing in my life was my spiritual growth. So I think like a week after that, Extreme Ownership is written to honor the life of Mark Lee, one of the SEALs killed in Ramadi. And his mom has created an organization called America's Mighty Warriors, Mama Lee. And she's become very close to us. And so I had an opportunity, Kathleen had an opportunity to go out to lunch with her. It must have been a week after you were on that leadership call. And I asked her, I said, Mama Lee, I said, how do you handle the burden of creating America's Mighty Warriors? And she looked at me in that motherly look and she says, it's not a burden, it's a calling. And so in that moment, I realized that I had been looking at everything the wrong way, that this wasn't a burden, that it was a calling given to me. So the next day I'd seen JP and I was telling him this story. And he's like, you got to go on this retreat in 2 weeks called Pursuit. And I said, yes, sir. I signed up. And it's where you connect with the Holy Spirit and you try and connect and find out what God has in store for you and what his path is. And so on that retreat, very loudly, I heard that SSLC was given to us to impact as many people as we can. And so from that point forward, then, Kathleen, she talked about her going on that pursuit and her finding her calling. And, through last year, through this year, it's just been one revelation after another of just continuing to be on this path, having people come into my life that believe in me more than I believe in myself, and just continue to help me connect with that greatness. And so it's just been an honor to even be on this journey and to talk to people and to just see our team of SSLLC, what that's doing for them. And yeah, it's just been an awesome journey.
When your wife Kathleen talks about it at the 4-year anniversary of your company, and even at the Women's Assembly in front of all of these people that are, Jamie Cochran, Echelon Front, a lot of female leaders that are there, your wife says this is not a story of a successful business, it's a story of redemption of a man.
Yeah, when she first said that, man, it just yeah, obviously I was there when she introduced Cody Gandy at our 4th-year anniversary. I listened to her speak at the Women's Assembly, and I've listened to her podcast several times, and quite frankly, it's the hardest thing that I ever have to listen to. But I can carry that because I know where we're at today. We're married, as you said, 33 years, and every facet of our life is better. Our relationship, my relationship with my children, um, my health, our business, just everything has gotten better. And it's just because I continue to look inward at how I can connect with that peace inside me so I can bring calmness instead of chaos to situations. And it's interesting. Last time Anna was out here, we don't really sit around and talk about that event because it's, when I was with her. Um, but I just asked her, I says, how are you processing? You hear the story, you're with mom, and she's like, oh, I don't really think much about it. But she did say that there's no way that she'd be working for us, and there's no way that we would have the relationship that we have if it wasn't for the work that I've done. So although we don't talk about it, it's definitely something that I have to be consistent and continue to stay on this path because those memories are never going to leave. So
Yeah, and that's so important, right? And we also talk about this. I mean, faith is very important, obviously, but you are not faith based, you are faith led when it comes to a lot of your business and a lot of your leadership. Can you explain the difference to our listeners who may not understand the semantics of that?
yeah, so um, yeah, I don't even know really what faith-based would mean. I guess that would mean that you talk about you talk about the faith. Um, you have it in your mission statement. But for me, it's 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 ho- it's who I serve, right? It's the number one. God is who I serve. And so what drives me is how I serve my priorities, which are God, Kathleen, my children, and SSLC. Is It's by our core values of our company of leadership, teamwork, humility, and ownership. And so for me, it's everything is driven through God, through His principles to honor Him. And so it's yeah, I don't have to tell it. I just have to show it. Um, and a person that has really helped me in that journey was last year I had the opportunity to, as you know, volunteer at Western Michigan and develop a relationship with Coach Taylor, and had the privilege of traveling with the team last year, and I traveled a little bit this year. But through that process, I was able to meet another volunteer coach called Mike Minter, and he was taking a sabbatical from coaching after coaching at Campbell University for 13 years, and our paths crossed. And I can remember walking on the field this August day, and there was a new face there, and I walked right up to him and I introduced myself, and I'm like, "Who are you on my field?" And he introduced himself, and the second question I asked him was, "What's his view of leadership?"
Hmm.
And so he said it's real simple. It's your beliefs trigger your behaviors, and your behaviors produce your results. And people can say whatever they want, but their behaviors prove their beliefs. And so we have cultivated a relationship since that time, like no other relationship I've ever had. And he is a very strong faith-driven person. And he's a person that when you're sitting next to him, you just feel better about yourself, and you wanna excel in who you are. And so he'll say something to me. He lives in Charlotte. He'll text me, and it'll be something that I'm thinking about. And it's just God is speaking to me through him, and vice versa. And so it's man, if I didn't have him in my life, I would probably go crazy just in the thoughts that I have, and the direction that this is taking me. But um, he's been able to really provide clarity and calmness to this journey that I've been on with my faith. So it's just it's a relationship. I actually wrote down, really, there's Kathleen, my kids, and then the other two are you and Mike, just because of where, we need other people in our lives to help us get to where we're going, to uncover that greatness inside of ourselves. Um, and so it's just, yeah, it's just driven to honor God. So that's really what it is. You don't have to say it, you just have to do it.
And I think that that is the best way to do it, right? Leading by example. People that understand those principles, they see it in you. You don't have to say it and they come up. And then when they ask you, you can talk about it. But I have found that if we try to lead with that, if we're heavy handed, to a lot of people, it pushes them away. Or sometimes if we do that, they look at it and they say, well, when you make a mistake, now they're saying, oh, well, that was not very, Christian of you. But the truth is, we're all human, we're all sinners, we're all fallible, we're imperfect, and we understand that. But that humility is what allows us to endeavor to be better in all these things. And that keeps us on the track. And like you said, that helps us all come together. That attraction is there, even if it's unsaid. And I think that that's the beauty of it, because it's a more difficult way to lead, because you truly have to really redouble your efforts all the time in the way that you conduct your actions, as opposed to claiming that we're doing this. And then when you look at what's really happening, they don't care about their people like they want to, or they say that they're doing one thing, and then at the end of the day, they're looking at the bottom line. So as long as it serves their needs, they'll claim it. But when the going gets tough, that's when a lot of times they let it go. For you, it is the opposite, and I've seen you do it in some challenging situations.
Yeah, and it's interesting this, in the last few months, I've said to you, like the the revelations that I am getting at the insights to myself. And it's interesting, Kathleen in this letter had said, don't try and fix everything. And it's something that I've realized that I've done in most of my relationships and situations, is going in to fixing them. And I read something a few weeks ago that said Jesus didn't look at people as problems. They looked as people to love and to comfort. And so you can't create a peaceful situation if someone's thinking that you're just there to fix them. Many times people just want to be loved and supported. And I reference, you know, my discerning brain is Paul, the apostle Paul was a multiplier. He went out to spread God's word. But right behind him, the person that brought Paul to light was Barnabas. Barnabas was there when Paul got struck down in Damascus. And so Barnabas is called the encourager. Paul is considered the multiplier. And so, in my mind, the way that I discern is, when do I need to be a multiplier and when do I need to be an encourager? And I would say 95% of the time, one of the most important relationships is Kathleen, and she just needs me to encourage her. She doesn't need me to lead her. She needs me to support her. And, a word that has becoming very prevalent this year is space, giving each other space, giving her space. If we invest in people with leadership, we have to give them the space to use that leadership. And so it's just one thing I've become very conscious of through Kathleen's example is just that space. And um, yeah, just letting people, as she did for me, even as you and as Mike, you know, um, you guys haven't really told me what to do. You have shown me to look inside myself so I can figure it out for myself. And I have to remember that in the relationships that I have.
Yeah, unless I see you going off a cliff and I have to pull on the wheel, which that's not going to happen. But yeah, if I saw something that was like somebody's hanging off of a building, so to speak, yeah, we would do something. But all the stuff that you need is in you. All the stuff that you need is in that relationship that you have with God. And when we let everything else turn down, we can hear it more often. And I think that was a beautiful example with Kathleen this year alone. You've intentionally cultivated and be space to allow her to step into these things, Can you tell us about how much she's evolved just in this year alone, specifically when it comes to speaking, leading, being able to follow those paths?
Yeah, I would say it's probably the greatest impact of this journey. And again, it's a burden that I have to carry because I realize what that does. I realize the negative side of that is the person that I was, the chaos I brought, how that limited her and her ability to grow because she never knew who was waking up alongside of her. Um, and so it really came, about in May where she was doing the work and, Scott and I recognized and we had a conversation and I says, we had decided not to go to the council this year to kind of invest our money in other areas. But I said, Scott and I talked, and I said, I think mom really deserved to go by herself. And it was an event her and I had, attended for 3 years in a row. And so she was apprehensive about it, but then I know you coached her through that, and she decided to take that opportunity. And um, interestingly, I ended up going to see our son Michael in Yellowstone while she was gone. And man, when she was at that council, I got really frustrated with myself, and I let my ego take because I'm seeing pictures, and I'm like, I'm supposed to be there. That's my event. Those are my friends. And what I realized was this is really where this Paul and Barnabas thing came up was in my reflection and and listening. It was time for me to be with Michael and for her to have her own experience. And it's just interesting that that's her takeaway from the council was how important it is to give people space. And she said what she recognizes she needs to give people space on her team. But I looked at that as she was saying to me to continue to give her that space because that's what she needed. And yeah, it's really been just her figuring out her coaching with you, um, you know, Anna coming aboard and her relationship with Anna and just really the work that she's doing on herself, and doing uncomfortable things. And, her stepping out of her comfort zone to tell our story on August 1st or August 2nd at our 4-year anniversary was something she'd never done before. And then, like you said, Jamie Cochran heard about it and asked her to speak at the Women's Assembly and then being on your podcast. And, I think she's doing the work and looking inside of herself and just really what her purpose is and where this path is taking her. And um, yeah, it's just she's doing the work. She's doing the work on herself. And um, yeah, it's just been great to see. Great to see.
Well, everybody in SSLC, everybody in your company is doing the work. They're always working towards something. They have smart goals. Of course, we have KPIs and goals in the company, but as you know, when we care about them as a human being, when we care about things that are going on outside of what they're doing specifically for the company, that helps them, one, develop those areas, and then that vicariously bleeds over into what they're doing with us. And then as a leader, we selfishly get to benefit from them being a great leader if they do the work. But when they become a great leader at the company, now they're a better parent, a better spouse, better in their community, and it helps them have a better idea of what they want to do. And you made this comment before we hit record about knowing who, how, and why you're serving, because you said that that's important to you because there was a time when you knew what that looked like when you weren't doing those things, when you didn't have that clarity. Explain to us what that means for our listeners.
Yeah, so just in the last couple of weeks, just I'm learning about how I understand things and gain clarity. And it's really started with your 5 circles that some a person could say, man, I gotta change my life or I gotta get better, right? But how do you know where to get better? So your 5 circles was the first introduction of saying, hey, let's compartmentalize the areas of your life, from your health to your finances to your relationships to your self growth to your spiritual growth. So now look at, hey, where are you out of balance? And so you can kind of look at where you got to work. Um, so as I think through things and I have thoughts, and um, to me, I have to kind of, with that theory of writing things down in circles. And so to me, just recently, I realized that when I created friction in my life, when I created chaos, I wasn't serving um, the priorities God had intended me to serve. And I mean, this can go back a long time. But I've recently just really defined what those priorities are. And as I said before, it's God, Kathleen, my kids, and SSLLC. And so I serve them through our core values of leadership, owning my own growth, teamwork, putting those people in front of my own needs, humility, asking questions, listening and learning. That's why I'm so adamant about, talking with you, talking with Mike, talking whoever I can to gain a better perspective. And then finally, the ownership piece, taking ownership of everything, not creating excuses, just providing solutions. And so, as I'm looking through, the things that cause me friction are when they're not serving one of those four priorities. And so it's allowing me to really say, if I'm feeling a friction, is it a friction of SSLC, my kids, my wife? That's a friction I got to deal with, and it changes the way I look at it. But if it's a friction that's coming outside of that thing, I probably don't have the bandwidth to figure that out. And it's just a situation that I have to move on from. And God is calling me to stick with those four priorities. So for me, it's allowing me to really be proactive with what's important. And so it's slowing down and it's thinking through, like, is this really serving those priorities? I asked one of my cousins, when this all happened with Anna, just trying to go back to the beginning of what she remembered from me as a little kid. She's about 3 years older than me. And she said, I got one story that reminds me of who you are. And my dad had a boat when we were growing up. And so I must have been about 6 years old. He's pulling the boat out of the water. And I took off running up this hill that was right by the boat launch. And she said she can remember like it was yesterday. I turned around and ran down that hill and just fell over ass over teacups. And my dad just looked at me and he said, son, your brain is moving way faster than your body. And it's really been um, who I've been. Like, it's just always going, going, going. And so Mike said something to me not too long ago. He said, I've known you for 14 or 15 months. I have never seen you make a mistake when you take your time thinking through something. But when you're that little kid running down that hill, ass over teacups, you make mistakes. And so I believe that this who you serve, how you serve, why you serve is an explanation God gave me so I could just continue to slow down and just bring peace to people, bring peace to myself. So
Yeah, it's everything. And again, it reminds us of the priorities. I always say, as you know, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. And then also you're making a great point about this ability to be still, even when it comes to listening, right? We've done the listening exercise at your company a couple of times. So explain to us why it's so important to not fix somebody and to just listen, and what is the power that is within that if we do it skillfully.
well, I would say where I really saw that was last year when I was traveling back to Western Michigan with Coach Taylor. Um, I just got the opportunity to build relationships with the team, with the coaches. I wasn't providing any coaching or anything from a football standpoint. And so I didn't have a voice. I was just there to listen. I was just there to watch and to listen, to see interactions. And so I would go to a game or I would go to a practice and I would just stand there and listen. And then I would come home and I'd be in team meetings and I started listening more. And what I saw was that space, that gap that I was giving people, that when I didn't talk, people were able to solve the issues on their own. And so it just, I traveled, you traveled to 2 games. I was there, I went to 12 games. So it was just this every week of just listening and just being present and then coming home and doing the same thing. And so I just really saw the team grow right in front of my face because I wasn't derailing the conversations. I wasn't bringing chaos. And, I realized that through that, I had to find a balance that I had to find my voice. For so long, my voice brought chaos to so many situations, but it was really a gift that God gave me. I had to learn how to use that.
Mm.
And so those priorities that I'm serving, that I have to discern when I'm supposed to talk, when I'm not. And it really creates that space for other people to learn. And I see it every day when you just allow people to talk and you're just listening and not interrupting. Um, Unfortunately, I got to remember all the conversations I've derailed in my life because I was always the pot stirrer,
Always
right?
stirring the spot. Yep.
Stirring the pot.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I did an interesting exercise in the past few months. I wrote my eulogy, and the last one of the last lines is I wrote it in the context of my granddaughter, right, reading the eulogy 30 years from now. And where this listening and where this piece has evolved to is, on my tombstone and at my funeral, if they could say that you just felt better in my presence about yourself, that I didn't even have to say anything. And that's how I feel. That's what you do for me. That's what Mike does for me. You guys have shown me that, man, you don't have to talk. When you listen and you give people that space, it really does empower them to get better themselves. And so you guys have been that example to me. And so it's definitely a battle every day. But um, it's something I'm working on
You're
all the time.
you're improving all the time. Meditation, journaling, doing all these things to intentionally cultivate empty space to stay within that. Because again, we understand that. And for those of you that don't think that listening is a big deal, or you say I'm going to listen until I get the part that I think that I need to answer this question, again, what are we doing? We're not listening at that point. We're trying to problem solve. And if I would just shut my mouth and listen for 2 or 3 minutes, or just let them speak until they are completed, or until they start repeating, now I can see the question that I had or the solution that I have. If I usually wait about 10 seconds, they tell me the next part of that that shows me that what I was trying to do to fix them was probably inaccurate, or they've already tried that. Or if I've got this one piece of information that they told me and they're still speaking, and I'm trying to think about how to apply it to fix them, I've lost that last 10 seconds that was probably even more important. And if I interrupt them, what have I done now? I violated that space. I violated that quiet, and then now they don't have the ability to continue to speak because I've derailed them. And sometimes just letting them speak 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, what needs to come out comes out. And sometimes you can even see the person realize as they're speaking to us the answer. You can see the light go off. But if we don't give them that, there's no way for us to do that. And then again, we talk about relationships. How does that help us build trust in the relationship? How does that help us communicate better? Again, Dr. Mark Goulston, he's passed away now, but he said people want to feel seen, they want to feel heard, but most importantly, they want to feel felt. And if we can do that, just like you say, now I don't have to tell somebody anything, but just our presence alone makes them feel better empowered, strong, intelligent, valued. And that's the sign of a great leader.
And I think Mike always talks about getting the reps, like everything we're doing, we're getting the reps at. And one aspect of our business with our EOS structure, I'm the visionary, I'm the CEO, and Scott, our son, is the integrator, the COO. And so then he really manages all the departments. And so early on, I would derail conversations, I would get involved, and it would just nobody could solve any problems because I was the one either solving the problems or interjecting things I shouldn't interject. And so last season, what I started to do is I just started to write down, like if we're in a meeting, I just wrote the things down. Um, and it's something that you always challenged me with, like, hey, just write it down, especially at night, and then wake up in the morning and see if that thing really is even important. And so writing stuff down, and then I'd be looking at it. I'm like, that doesn't even need to be said. Um, and so those reps that Scott and I have been able to really work through, again, has allowed him the space to lead and to develop and to be able to ask better questions of me and of his team, because I'm empowering with him with that responsibility, and I'm not looking over his shoulder. I'm giving him, and he knows what questions to ask, and um, and the person that he's developing in, we talked about that 60 million, and I said it's really not, doesn't matter the revenue, it's who people are becoming. And Kathleen and Anna and Scott, and he just had our first grandchild, our granddaughter, and he was off for 30 days. I talked to him twice. Um, and we visited him twice, but I gave him that space. We all gave him that space. And he prepared the team for his departure, and he was gone for 30 days, and our team grew. And that's a reflection of listening and giving him the space to lead, and just taking that step back. So it's just so many examples that we just saw the success of listening and giving that space. Um, yeah, it's really undeniable. Um,
It is,
yeah, and it
especially.
started, like you said, those listening exercises that you did for us, and um, yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, but it helps us dethrone our ego, helps us really listen, not through the lens of what we want or what we expect or what we're trying to get out of it. We just listen without any expectation. And that's when we can actually see and hear the truth. And you've talked about something, the power of something that's very prevalent in leadership or in life, frankly, and it's called the reframe. Tell us the power of the reframe. Give us an example of it. And then why is that so powerful?
So, the idea of the reframe is that you could change anything in an instant just by reframing. And so, with Mike's leadership concepts of beliefs to behaviors to results, um, everyone wants to focus in on changing the behavior. And so when that happened with Anna, and I wanted to never put myself in that position, even though I didn't believe in God, God told me to go back to the beginning. He said, you have to figure out why you believe what you believe. Don't focus in on the behavior.
Mm.
And so what I was able to do was I went back and I figured out why I drank, how I developed those habits. And I changed the way I looked at it. Scott had a coach when he was at Michigan. The guy said, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. And that's really what reframing is. Just change the way you look at it. And so I changed that situation. I changed where my beliefs came from in an instant when I saw that Jocko video. And I knew that that was the start of something new. And I was going to reframe that. And then the next part of it is when you reframe it, you have to be thankful for it. As you say, no bullshit gratitude, like nothing you've ever been grateful for before. With, your story and your energy, like when you found a way to be grateful, that's what you say. No bullshit gratitude for not have putting others in danger. And the change, that's what started your recovery.
Yes.
And so that reframing, man, and so it's been something that's been on my mind. And Mike and I had a chance to go visit another plumbing contractor in Indianapolis. And we had the opportunity to sit down and talk with the owner. And it's a 70-year-old company. His dad started the business in 1955. He bought the business in 1985 and has taken it to 300 million in revenue, 1,000 people. And so we're sitting, Mike and I and the owner, and I shared my story. And he kind of leaned back in his chair and kind of looked away. And I seem like people always are looking away and looking back at me. It's like, it's a habit, right? He looks back at me and he's like, my dad was a alcoholic. And I lived in a lot of chaos and emotion centered around alcohol. And then he did something I'd never seen before, where he reframed it. And it was the most powerful thing that he was thankful for. And what he said was, my dad fought the demons so I wouldn't have to. And for that, I am grateful to him. And the look in his eyes and the power that he gained from that, Mike and I were just speechless. And so in that moment, that reframing has just, when I was back at since I've been back at Western, I've got to know the team chaplain, Pastor Craig, and one of his talks to the team was about the rebound ratio. And so basically success in your development comes from how quick you could reframe a situation. Is it a second? Is it a minute? Is it an hour, a week, a year, 10 years, 50 years? Like you say, there's only two ways to handle adversity, correctly or again. And that really comes from how you reframe it. And so this reframing, it's just been an incredible, simple word to use of how you could change your life in an instant. Because all you got to do is reframe it. Because it's your story. Who's going to argue with you?
That's it. If that's how you see it, then that's how it is, right? That is the truth, right? Perception is reality. And we can choose what that perception is anytime we choose to take ownership and take accountability of what we're doing. It gives us agency in everything. We're never the victim. We never blame other people or outside events. We can't control those people.
And the last week I've just been really thinking about that. What are we reframing? It's one thing to say, we're a multifamily plumbing contractor, right? We have to go fix something. There's a leak or we have to change something, right? We got to take our tools. We physically have to go out there. It's a tangible thing, right? We could see it. We got to reframe this. It's nothing. It's really nothing. We have to reframe the way we're thinking about a situation. That's all it is. But our ego, our emotions, we want to hang on to that. After I went on that pursuit, I realized that when I got sober, I blamed my mom for my drinking. And my mom at that point had been, she'd been dead for 11 years. And as I say, people are either running from something or running towards something. So I was running from who I was. I never wanted to put myself in that situation. And so I blame my mom for not being the mom I was supposed to have. She didn't give me the attention, the love, and that's what created all these problems. And after I went on that retreat, somebody talked about the capacity somebody has.
Mm.
And that person had said, I don't have 100% capacity right now. And the person said, I don't need 100%. I just need what you have. And in that moment, I reframed the relationship I had with my mom because I realized that my mom, I had the exact mom that I needed. I had the mom that gave me everything she had. And and so I reframed a relationship after 14 years of her being gone. And I was sharing that I have one sister, and I was sharing that with her. And as I was telling her the story, she's just shaking her head at me. And when I got done, she's like, Mom gave you everything she had. And so it's just, what did I change? My mom's not even here. And even, you had the chance on one of your visits, you met my sister. We visited where she lives in Michigan. And, even my sister's battled cancer. And even in our relationship, she sat there. I never heard her say this before, but she sat there at lunch and she talked about how much chaos and anxiety I brought to her my whole life. And so now she's been able to reframe and to hear her say that she's proud of me is like she of anybody, she knows the truth of who I was and how I was and all that. And for her, she's reframed it. She could have lived with who that person was and the chaos I brought to everything. Even she has reframed her sickness and who I was. And so it's yeah, that reframing, I mean, it kills people when you don't do it.
Yeah. It's about this ability to have radical acceptance of what happened, not what we would rather have happened, to see the truth. And when we do that, then that gives us all the power. But if we don't, we'll stay stuck in that. We'll stay in that denial. And people do it for decades, an entire marriage, an entire profession, an entire career. And then something big has to happen to force them to do the reframe. And luckily, you were able to see the reframe as quickly as you have. But some people never see it until it's too late. And lots of times, it's a deathbed, it's a loss of a loved one, it's a loss of a fortune, it's a loss of physical capacity. And that's the adversity that forces them to let go of the smaller things that aren't big, stop making it bigger than what it is, and deal with this bigger thing. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, I could have done that with all these other things if I'd have just accepted this and reframed it.
So do you think it's naive of me to think, just a privilege to be on your podcast and share my story and Kathleen having that opportunity. We joke like Kathleen's biggest adversity was me. Like she didn't have some dark moment. For me, it took the lowest point of my life to reframe things. But and I have this belief in me that if we're at peace with who we are and we're at calm and we're good with who we are, that we can be an example to other people. And if we meet them where they're at and they start doing the reps, it's just a skill that eventually they can get there without experiencing some traumatic adversity. I mean, is that too naive for me to think that?
It's not naive, it's actually very true. But we also have to take in consideration that most human beings, we can tell them that that stove is hot all day, but they got to touch it at least once before they realize how hot. Why is this a big deal? Now, once they do it, hopefully that's enough. But some people, again, they continue to go through these cycles where they think, well, I'll figure it out on my own, or I don't believe them, or that's cliche. But the reason why things are cliche is because they are so undeniably true. And we somehow think that we can get away with it, or that we're the exception to the rule. But that's why it never feels more true to us than after it happens. And now we're going to scream at the top of the hilltops about how important this cliche is. But guess what? It falls on deaf ears. Why? Because it's cliche. That's the truth.
I guess we die trying, right?
We give everything we can to get there. And
Right.
so you've done a lot of self-assessment, a lot of brutal self-assessment. You've done a lot of leadership training. How many events have you gone to when it's come to leadership in the last, say, 4 years, would you say?
So our first leadership event was at Muster in March of 22. So since that time, I've attended 28 leadership events, not considering, you've come and spoken twice. Carlos has spoken twice. Carlos Mendez from Echelon Front. Cody has come last year. JP, but where I've gone and traveled and went to leadership events, I've been to every leadership event that Echelon Front, Jocko and Leif's organization has put on. Um, the one thing that I saw and really how this started was when I went to that first muster. We have somewhat of a complicated business, that especially early on, Kathleen would have had a lot of difficulty running if something was to happen to me. So quite frankly, when we started this business to give it away. We started it that we wanted to create a system. We wanted to create this about the success of other people because, we were older and, I didn't know how long we would be doing this. And so when I went to that first Echelon Front event, Jamie Cochran was up there talking about stories of impact. And they had talked about somebody that had just been to an FDX, that had been engaged with Echelon Front and had a heart attack and passed away, and how Echelon Front stepped in to just provide leadership and counseling, to the leadership team at that organization. And so, man, right away I saw like I needed to build relationships with those guys to protect Kathleen. And so it was to serve her. But what I began to find was that, the more events I went through, the thresholds I went through. And so every event, I've gone to 9 musters. Every event, I'm gaining a new perspective from it. And, I joke with people sometimes as I say, why do you think I'm where I'm at, whether it's with SSLC or me personally? And of course, they don't know the answer to the question I'm asking, but I said, I've asked more questions than everybody in our company put together. Probably I've asked more questions than anybody I know, everybody put together. And so I'm constantly asking questions. And so getting around Echelon Front gave me the, truly embody our humility core value of asking questions, listening, and learning. You look at that's how Mike and I formed our relationship. You started asking me questions. You knew you needed to ask me questions.
Right.
And I started asking. I asked you, what did you see in me when you met me at that council 3.5 years ago?
I saw greatness below all these other layers, all this other like chaos, all this rough exterior, because I could see the passion inside you, but I knew that you didn't know how to get there in certain areas, which is why you ask questions. And then when I was asking you some of these questions, I could feel some of that stuff start to, even within our first interaction at lunch, some of that started fluffing off. You were talking, if you recall, about driving and how you were trying to get this $7 million or this $10 million piece of business across the finish line, and you were pushing as hard as you possibly could. And then I said, what if you took your foot off the gas? And again, that was completely diametrically opposed to what you thought you needed to do. But then later on, you actually did that, correct? And what happened?
Yeah, I had actually just prior to the council, I had lost an opportunity. And I know looking back, I was pushing too hard. And the 3 weeks following that council, I relaxed. I'm just like, hey, this is who we are. And we ended up getting $10 million worth of work after sitting in front of similar groups like I had before the council. And I just really saw that people aren't going to deal with somebody who is putting pressure or feels pressure on themselves. The more calm you are, the more people want to be around you.
Yeah, you give them
Um,
permission to be calm. You give them
right.
permission to not feel like this is a used car salesman, or I have to like get this done right now, or if I don't. And that was the beginning, because once you told me that you did that, I was like, this guy's coachable. He really wants to learn, because there are people that ask questions all day. Let's be real, but they don't want the answer, or they want the answer, but they're not going to take action on it because the answer that you give them is either too difficult or it's an answer that they don't want to work on. They want you to tell them what they already believe to be true, but a good coach doesn't do that. A good coach asks you a question so that you have to be honest with yourself and say, who do I serve? Why am I doing this? Does this fit my 80/80? Is this in line with all my other belief systems? And if it's not, then I'm lying to myself. But you were able to do that. And again, you come so far in 4 years. You come so far in being able to be at peace, to be calm, to allow there to be space, to not feel like you had to fill that space with energy or conversation. And that's the sign of a person who is at peace. We've talked about this before, right? If we really are at peace in our beliefs, in our relationship with God, with all these things, we exude that peace in other places. And within that peace, it helps us really see what's happening. And then it also gives us the capacity to realize if something needs to happen and we have to be assertive or direct, we can do it at the drop of a pen. Bruce Lee said the reason why I'm so fast is because I'm relaxed entirely until the moment that I snap the punch out. And so if you see his 1 inch punch, or if you see his speed, it's because he comes from a completely relaxed place. For us, it's the same way. Meditation, journaling, just being still. And that's when we can hear these things. That's when we get these downloads after the workout or on a walk or getting out of the shower. And now we had this space, and now God can get to us. He can give us that. So within you, I saw all those things, but I saw a man that was fighting internally against all these other things about, I should do this, I should do this, I should do this, I should do this. You had too many options, and you were trying to do them all at 1,000 miles an hour. That's what I saw. I saw great potential and opportunity in you. And look at you now.
Yeah, and it's been interesting as the people I talk to evolve, and you were that, it was JP, and then it was meeting you, um, and if I never meet you, I know Mike wouldn't have connected with me. He wouldn't have been a person that he would have wanted connected with, and I think that's really um, a missing piece in people, is that you cannot do this by yourself. And even as much as, my priority to honor God and Kathleen, I keep saying it, and my kids and SSLC, but I need something outside of that, because I believe God talks to us through individuals. And um and they show us that way, as Mike says, show the way. And we get to choose who we associate with. And so we get to determine what that greatness is for ourselves and what we aspire to be like.
Yes.
So if we have a choice, why not go out and find the best, or the most successful in those areas, in those 5 circles?
Yes.
Why are you going to talk to somebody about your health that's, overweight, doesn't work out, but maybe has read a lot, right? I mean, you want somebody that has,
Yep.
as you say, embody, the octa non verba.
Right.
And so, that's why our relationship and Mike's relationship, and, I'm reevaluating a principle my dad taught me and didn't even know he taught me, but he'd always say, and I said this at his funeral, he'd hold up his hand and he says, if you could go through life with only 5 friends, you would be a success. But he never talked about what that meant, right? So I thought, man, I could have 20. Why do I only have to have 5? I could have 20 friends. I could have 30 friends, right? No, man, you don't have the capacity to have probably more than 5 relationships. Partly because I think it's just trying to find people that you want to be like. Between you and Mike, as we say, those 1%ers,
Yeah.
this is what I aspire to be like. This is what I attain like. And so you guys are going to push me to uncover that greatness inside of myself. Um, and again, here's another aspect of that is for a while there, I would always say, why me? Like, why are these people coming into my life? Why is Jocko and Leif pouring into me, or JP or Cody or you? And I realized this year had nothing to do with me. It had to do with they saw you guys have seen in me that I will do it for other people. That's it.
Absolutely.
I'm just a conduit. And so what you do for me, I'm going to do for everybody I meet. That's in fact Jocko's and Leif's mission is to impact the world. And they impact the world by talking to one person
Yes.
who hopefully will go talk to other people to a point where they'll go talk to other people. Um, and so, but man, people from us, there's no way you can grow as a man, as a father on your own. You need to align with somebody that's gonna push you at times, tell you what you need to know, encourage you, inspire you, and be there for you.
Yeah. And we
So
have to be, and we have to have that person that's there for all those things. If we're just that person that's constantly hammering somebody, we're not giving them the other side of the coin, we're not serving them. If they're just a person that's a yes man, or they just gas you up, but they don't give you any like practical like pushback to for the iron to sharpen the iron, then you're not going to be able to get where you need to go either. So that's where that balance is, and that's where the ability to do it correctly is important. So with all this leadership that you've experienced, all this training that you've done, what is the biggest misconception around leadership that you see continually repeated by people?
not everybody could be a leader.
Mm.
That's not up to us to decide. We have examples within our company that, um, so I make 2 guarantees to everybody that comes to our company. Number one is I will do the work myself every day to become a better leader. And now what that means is to continue to uncover that peace inside of me so I could bring peace and not chaos. Um, and the other thing is I provide that opportunity to everybody else. I don't know what somebody's going to do with that. I mean, we have 22-year-old kids, we have 24-year-old kids, we have people in their 30s, we have people in their 40s, all that have taken these leadership skills and changed their life. And we have people that aren't here anymore that wasn't willing to do it. So, but that's their choice. That's not our choice. So I think for someone to say not everybody is a leader, um, that's the biggest misconception, because that person you think that wasn't supposed to be a leader will probably be a better leader than you. Um, but again, it all comes back to what we've been talking, right? Looking inward, finding that
Yes.
peace in ourselves, listening to them, meeting them where they're at,
Yes.
showing them, loving them, not fixing them.
Yeah.
So everything's connected. Everything's connected.
It absolutely is. So for a person who is a young leader, what advice would you give them? I know we've talked about a lot of these things and you give them some great advice and some great examples, but if you had a young leader and they were saying, I want to go out and lead, but maybe people won't listen to me, or I don't have a title, or I don't have, why should I lead? What would you tell them?
I would say find that one thing inside of you that you're either mad about, fearful about, or just avoiding from wherever, from when you were a kid or whenever that is. Maybe it's something that happened 5 years ago. Maybe that's all you can start. But there's something in all of us that we have to deal with and we have to reframe. And so maybe it starts with easy things, right? And then it goes back. You just continue, as you say, you got to go back to the beginning. So, because to me, we talk a lot about detaching as a skill where, you're approaching a problem, you're getting emotional, and you pull yourself back and take yourself out of the situation to be able to look at it in a calm sense. And I think 75, 80% of the time, you can develop a skill that will work. But if you have things inside of you that are unresolved, 20% of the time, your wife is going to unload the dishwasher the wrong way and you're going to get mad at her. Or she left a pile of flowers on the deck and you're going to be like, really? And it's not, you're going to sit there and you're going to be like, why am I upset about this? It's not going to make sense. Why you're upset about this is because of that thing that happened when you were 5 years old. Maybe you got abused. Maybe something happened and you started drinking, whatever that is. That thing is going to come out at the dumbest times and you're not going to know why. So is figure out those things that you need to reframe in your life. And then become a student of leadership, just leading yourself. Because everything we talk about is a skill. Um,
Yeah, it's repeatable. It's something that we can develop. And again, leaders lead, right? We don't ask for permission. We don't ask for the title. We don't. We're not told to go lead. We just do it. I've seen you. I can't tell you how many times that there's been some sort of leadership gap in some capacity with communication with a other company with groups of other people, and you just step in and you start directing and you start leading because that's the way you are. Because again, if it's in line with your priority and what you want to do, the next logical step is to lead towards this thing. And if nobody else has already taken the lead on that, then you just step forward. And that's just makes the most sense. And that's why, again, a lot of these relationships that you've introduced me to, Mike Mentor, who will be on the show, you know, pretty soon in the future as there was a great thing that we have coming up in April with John. So could you explain to us a little bit of what that looks like and who John is? And you gave me a great experience to be able to go up there to the Sand Hills and experience herd bull as well.
so I met John Howell through a business associate in Denver. Scott Zimmerman owns a plumbing distribution company, and he came to the muster in San Antonio. Uh, Coincidentally, Scott played with Mike one of the years Mike was with Caroline, and the first time they had seen each other was at the muster because Mike went to the muster as well. And then Scott's friends with this John Howell, so he brought John to the muster as well. Um, Again, coincidentally, John played the same position Mike did in the NFL, and actually won a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. He was a strong safety. So very successful in business. But in John's family, he had a 40,000 acre ranch in the Sandhills in Nebraska. It's been in his family for 125 years. So he has gotten to a point of his life. He wanted to invest back in his ranch and do corporate hunts, as well as he created a non-for-profit called Herd Bull University. It's an organization, a non-for-profit organization that helps young boys transition into manhood by using branding or shooting or just being outdoors and fellowship with men. And so I had the opportunity, Kathleen and I went up there, and then I had the opportunity to go to a branding last May. Um, and it's just an incredible property in the middle of nowhere. So John's vision, he invested about $8 million in building this huge lodge, and he's doing corporate hunts, as I said, to help fund this herd bull university. And so, it's something that I really want to help support, John. And so I had talked to you and Mike about it, and you guys were very interested in the idea as well. Um, and so we all took a visit up there last fall, and you guys got a chance to see it. And I guess I'll ask you, when we pulled off the road to pull into there, I stopped the car because you and Mike had been driving together. And
Mhm.
I walked up to you guys and I said, "Hey, as you drive up to the lodge, I just want you to hold on to what you see as you see it and walk into that lodge." So I'll ask you, as you did that, what did you see?
Man, it was incredible. It was so majestic. The entire scene that you have, the sun's going down, this incredible lodge, this modern facility. Across from it, he has this huge workout facility. He has all this equipment in there, between mixed martial arts stuff to lifting weights. And then when you walk in, it's got, because I went hunting in South Africa, I spent some time there. So when I walk in, the very first thing that you see is like all these beautiful mounted trophies. And there's this huge, he has that leopard mounted as soon as you walk in. And again, I hadn't spoken to John other than shaking his hand and say, "Hey, great to meet you." And I walk in and I'm like, "You have to tell me the story about this, because this is not, you don't have these things in a place like that unless you've actually gone out and done it." And then we were instant, instant friends after that. Just an incredible place where you can detach, you're away from everything. Everything that you need is there and nothing that you don't. And this is what allows this environment. You cultivate the environment that allows people to have space, create relationships, fellowship. And that's why when you talk to Mike and I about this, and I looked at it, it was like, this would be perfect for people. It's very exclusive. There's only about 10 to a dozen rooms that they allow. So if somebody is wanting to do this, whenever we start doing this, this is something they could bring their company, they can bring, their leadership team, whomever it is, and they can have this experience where all these natural leadership lessons come through, like you said, the outdoors, shooting, fishing, horseback riding, working out together. And then, of course, what did, I think Zimmerman said that his son said the most impactful thing for him when he was there. The events were beautiful, but he said that the conversations that were had around the campfire or inside the lodge were the things that impacted him the most as a leader and as a young man.
Yeah, and um, this, our mission, my mission to focus on building relationships for the success of everyone. Through my relationship with Mike, it's really identified what success looks like is, hey, finding out what people want and help them get it. And so Mike's mission is to impact as many people as he can as well. And so we're kind of, as is yours. And so we're all joining together to say, hey, how about if we just impact business leaders, right? Bring into a summit, maybe 8 to 10 leaders where they could come in. And the activities they have is they have a 5-man clay pigeon trap shooting area that we all partake in. It's a great team building,
Mm-hmm.
kind of an icebreaker. They have a long range shooting area where you can shoot actually a 50 cal a mile and a half, and they have 3 stations in there that you can kind of do a team event and learn about the skills that takes. And then also, you showed us your skills of handgun shooting, where they have a handgun station, and there's leadership skills, different skills that are required for each of those areas. But really, this is, as I continue to think about this, um, thinking about myself and what has really guided my behavior. I only have a sister, and so I never had a brother. And what I realized is that I was always looking to have a brother, right? And so that's when I went to Western, just creating this camaraderie of a bunch of different men and creating that fellowship. And so, as Kathleen has expressed, her motto is really to mother others. I've started to think that could we create an organization that is a brother to others, right? And so, um, to me, a relationship is a relationship that we could each grow from each other. It's not what I love about our relationship is although you came into this as a coach, you've become one of my closest friends, and you have grown in this process. And so,
Absolutely.
a relationship of God is one that I get better, you get better, and then we help others get better. And so, with that, I'll just ask you the question. You've been with us for 3.5 years. Um, how has being around SSLLC impacted your life?
Man, it's long ranging because so I get to speak. You've given me the honor to speak to all of your leaders a couple times a month, and I speak to every employee there once a month at least. And then I'm open to them if they need any sort of support in a leadership capacity or anything else. What's been so powerful for me is to see how, one, I can see an event that occurs and I can see the ripple effect throughout the company, but how, as you're saying, each person may see it differently. But when they do that, they also take ownership and that lane that they're in, and they start chipping away at trying to solve the problem. That's been powerful. Also, there's not a day that goes by that I don't get a text from somebody in your company that tells me, "Hey, I just ran my first ultra marathon. Hey, I just benched 315. Hey, I'm on a, I just finished this book. Hey, I'm going back to school for this thing." So every single person at your company is already doing incredible things as a leader in the company. But now, they're running, they're doing these things that they wouldn't normally do. They're finding this physical mastery, and that's pouring over into everything else that they do. And that shows me this is what happens when you have people that really care about each other, that have a common mission, that have a common goal. And here's the thing, and I say this to people on the phone too, especially if we're interviewing. I tell them, listen, we're not perfect, okay? But we are endeavoring to be better, and we will fail, and we are human, but we will take ownership. We will find a plan to correct it, and we'll move forward from that. So that shows me how, again, how far spreading this stuff is. And that's impacted me in ways that, even as I think about it, it's just continuing to grow. That wake and those impacts are just tremendous. And it shows me, again, a testament to what you're believing, how you're doing it. You could not reach what you've done. You could not hit this pinnacle unless you were actually doing it consistently on a regular basis. And I think that's what people forget. They bring out a leadership speaker, or they go to an event, or they go away to something, right? And they're excited for 10 minutes or a week, but they don't go back. They don't do the difficult work. I mean, implementing EOS into your company, I mean, was that an easy transition?
Um, what I saw in EOS, again, looking inward was, Scott when he joined, he started asking some questions that I didn't know how to answer. Um, and so when we got introduced to EOS, by Ryan, um, I instantly saw that this was going to solve most of our problems as leadership, most of my weaknesses. And so where most leaders would hide from that, I embrace that. I'm like, man, I like this is gonna teach us all how to be leaders in a company. This is all gonna teach us how to run a company. And so, like, we were so young. We were only in business a little over a year. So it was just like developing our culture. We say extreme ownership is our foundation of our company, and then EOS is a structure that sits on top. With the culture we had already built to that moment, like everyone just embraced it because they saw how we were growing and how we needed to help and
Yes.
saw our weaknesses. And so, yeah, it was actually quite the opposite. Like we all embraced it. Now we did lose people along the way, that were on our initial leadership team, but that was just as we were going as a company. That's what happens. Um, but yeah, it was just again, just taking a step back and looking inside and just saying, is this going to uncover a weakness in me? I don't care.
I would need to see it, right? I want to see it because
Right.
if it's a blind spot, I'm going to keep getting ambushed by it. And back to what people in your company are doing, I see over and over again that we're constantly changing, we're constantly growing, we're constantly evolving. So even when we get a system or an SOP in place, we're trying to find a better way to do it. And most of the people, so most people hate change, especially if it's something that they're not the ones that are initiating the change. But most of the people that I speak to, they're in a place where they are just at peace with this idea that, listen, this is going to happen. There is going to be change. There is going to be adversity. And instead of like making it bigger than what it needs to be, they understand because we've been through enough together in the last 4 years that there will be a skill set, that there will be people, or there will be a process that we can come up with. Everything is figure outable. There's nothing that we're going to run into that we are not going to be able to figure out with a conversation with leaders or a bunch of us putting our heads together or being very honest and saying, what am I missing here? And I think that's where that, again, that group humility in this culture is everything. The culture that you've created, it's like, like Alabama, right? Like when Coach Saban's talking about that, it's like you have this standard of excellence, and the people that want to be at that standard want to be at that standard. The people that are mediocre don't want to be at that standard, and that's where that friction is. And the culture that you have creates that ability for them to level up into what that looks like. And like you said, along the way, some people aren't here, and that's okay. They didn't want to be a part of what we were doing, and that's fine. But the people that want to be a part of it, they double down, triple down, redouble their efforts. They want to get better. And that's why you're able to accelerate into 60 million in less than 60 months.
Yeah. So just, I mean, just so, we're going to call this the summit and, um, Mike's been a coach, you've been a coach, but really the way that we want to approach this is we want to get people that want to work on something for themselves. And so, you know, the three of us are developing a system of how to address challenges and in in a really cool way. People can um, create a challenge, another person solves a challenge, other people just watch it, and so we all get reps at coaching. And so it's just is to make this something that they could take away with something that they can solve. Not just talking about things in a book, or we want this to be an individual summit where people walk away solving a problem and actionable act the nonverbal, go home and act on what they learn. Um, and so we're really excited about this opportunity. So,
Yeah, we'll give them tools, we'll make them use that tool there. And now it's not the first time they're having to do it when they face something difficult, a real adversity in their
right.
in their home, in their marriage, in their company. And now that gives them, again, that skill set is better acquired. And I'll have John on the show soon as well, and we'll start putting out more information about the summit as we get closer to that. And we've been talking for a little while, but I'd like to ask you one more question before I let you go.
All right.
What is a compliment that you've received that you've never forgotten?
What is a compliment that I've never forgotten? Um, there's just one thing. The one thing that comes to mind is something that just happened this week. And I'm not, I mean, people have been very gracious with me, and that's one thing that you have helped me um, understand is giving myself grace and understanding the value that I have. And when somebody gives me a compliment, um, don't turn away from that. Um, I had a random lady on a plane last year. She was asking about my family, and I said, "Yeah, we have 4 kids. They're great kids, but it's all because of my wife." And she's like, "Why do you do that?" I'm like, "Do what?" She said, "You discount your involvement in raising your children. Like it or not, you're 50% responsible." And so when you discount that, you make people feel uncomfortable. And so just say, "Hey, my wife and I, we raised 4 great kids," and just leave it at that. If they compliment you, say thank you, as you have. Um, but the thing that sticks out to me was as as I've been focused and has led up to this, who I serve, how I serve, why I serve. That second one is Kathleen.
Mm.
And so last week, I'm always texting her my thoughts and just different things that I'm thinking about. And she asked me, "Does this make sense?" And I said, "Well, quite frankly, most of this never makes sense. But what I'm understanding is that when it's of God, it's not up to us to understand, it's up to us to have faith." So I said, "Really, there's only one question I have of you is, do you feel that you're a priority?"
Mm.
And she said, "Absolutely." And so, being married for 33 years, understanding that for a long time she didn't feel a priority. In fact, I can remember the days where she told me she knew she wasn't a priority, that she can tell me honestly that she feels that she's a priority. To me, that's a compliment that I'll never forget of the work I'm doing, and that how I need to stay consistent with that because um yeah, to have my wife proud of me, to have my children proud of me, have the people of SSLC proud of me. It's a reflection. It's a reflection of the work I'm doing. It's a reflection of you. It's a reflection of Mike. It's a reflection of so many things. And again, going back to that, um, that 60 million, that's a huge compliment, but it's not for what everybody thinks. It's because of what that says. And there's the times are getting more and more often where someone kind of puts me into a corner and says, "What do you and Kathleen want out of this?" And I won't answer it. And they get uncomfortable. Like everybody, like, how long do you want to stay in the business? How much money do you want out of this? Like what do you want to have? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter because we're focused in on everybody else. I know we grow the business to provide more opportunity, the more money, the more things we can give our people. That's what's important to us. So I guess the compliment is our revenue number because I know what that says. And then just to have my wife feel a priority. Um, and I never thought that I could be in this position mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And so for that comment that she's a priority is really the biggest compliment I could ever have.
Yeah, I always say that to the CEOs that I know and owners, co-founders, the most important KPI that I see in them is their relationships around them. And if those are good, everything else is great. Because I've seen it where it's the other way around. And they're working 16 hours a day and they're screaming at people and they're building a culture based on fear. And maybe they're hitting hundreds or 200s worth of million. But is that the person they want to become? Do they want to break and sacrifice everything else that's really important in their lives? And then somehow continue to do that to justify the sacrifice that they're making. So again, having that alignment, knowing who you serve, why you serve, where you want to go, knowing what is truly a priority and letting go of all the bullshit that is not, that's how we begin the path. And that's how we continue to move forward and find the right people as we go towards those endeavors.
And I know, we've joked, you and I, how you've communicated with me about giving myself grace, but then your mentors, your coaches have to do the same thing to you.
Yep.
And so
Yes.
I just want to, as we close that, the compliments that I had, that I said, as far as the 60 million, Kathleen, my children, everything that you see, it's a direct relation to what the work you have done within our company, with the coaching you've done with my family. And as for Mike as well, Mike has donated his time all this year to being with us. And, um, we've helped him transition out of football, and, he's been able to spend time with his family and with his fiance. And, um, what we're doing is a compliment to you guys. And so I just want you to make sure you understand that, um, and give yourself some credit.
Well, thank you. I will accept that compliment wholeheartedly. I won't shy away from it. And frankly, I'm proud to be a part of what you're doing. And I'm really excited about what the future holds for all of these things we're doing as we move forward. Scott Sipniewski, people can follow you on LinkedIn. Where else would you send them to learn more about SSLC plumbing in Colorado Springs? You're in the Colorado area, and you're also starting to work in some of these surrounding areas as well.
Yeah, Cheyenne, we have some work. We're expanding into Cheyenne. So our website is ssllc.pro, PRO, and I'm on LinkedIn, as is our company. And um, yeah, just reach out. My email is scott@ssllc.pro. If anybody ever wants to connect, and I'm always looking to learn from anybody. So
Yeah,
yeah, everybody has value.
absolutely. Scott actually absorbs what is useful, discards what is useless, and adds what specifically is own, as Bruce Lee would say. And it's an honor to call you a friend. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Been a privilege.
Mine too.